present our participants today. This is a pleasure to be hosting this first panel in this Women's Forum Mexico City 2019. This is the first after Pamsile, the Undersecretary General of UN, make the fire starter. So it's your time, girls. I'm gonna begin this way. This is Maria Teresa Arnal. She's Managing Director of Google Mexico. Hello, thank you very much. Ana Paula Assis with us. She's General Manager of Latin American for IBM. Monica Flores, nice meeting you right now, President Latin America, ManpowerGroup, and Claudia Herreramoro, Director Communication Latin America for P&G Procter Gamble. So the first question, girls, is from now, after we heard such an inspiring and enlightening words of Christine Lagarde and Pumsile Malambo, what's next? You are leaders in your sectors and in the region. What's next for women in these areas? So who's gonna begin?
Thank you, Yuriria, and thank you, Women's Forum, for having us up here. Is it working now? Yeah. So I think this is a journey, right? I see this as a journey, and I particularly, I think we're at the beginning of the journey. At Google, what we are doing is, first of all, you need to measure things, right? To understand where you are, where do you start. You're not gonna get where you're not measuring. So we started a few years ago by being very transparent in the spirit of the company as to where we stand. So we launched our gender report. It's available. You can go to google.com and just search for the report and read through it and read through the challenges that we already have in our company, and this is true in tech companies as well. We still have a big challenge with respect to getting women to top leadership positions. So, we start by measuring and understanding where we stand, and then getting very specific measures as to how do we move forward in terms of making sure we recruit, we include, and we promote women in the company. And I think that there are specific things that we are doing, not only for the development of women within the company. There we have very specific programs for women development, women leadership developing within the company, but we also think that inclusion is super important. And by that, I mean bringing men to the conversation. I think that, just by talking about women issues, it can be a little alienating to men. So we're trying to make sure that we're including men into this, and that we also create a culture where we understand that there are certain behaviors or certain instances where women might not feel comfortable, and this is around unconscious biases, cultural things, a lot of the things that were already discussed before the panel. And last but not least, and this is something related to what Mrs. Lagarde was mentioning, is how do we spill this over to the community? And as she was mentioning, and going specifically to Latin America, there is 1.2 million jobs in the tech, in the STEM related area that are going to be created in the next 5 years in Latin America. If we don't create the pipeline of women to be able to take those jobs, the situation will only worsen from what it is today, which is already a challenging situation. So we're doing very specific actions with the community to make sure that since childhood, girls get exposed to the sciences, to technology, to maths, and that this is fun, that it actually solves problems, and that they can actually get involved, and that this is cool, because there gets to a level around 11, 13 years old when it stops being cool, right? That like you're not cool anymore when you're a math geek. So we're trying to help communities get this on board, as well as, let's say, less favorable community, and this we do again through partnerships, Laboratoria being one of our great partners in Mexico, in which we are trying to include women that have less privilege into making sure they learn about these skills and have the opportunity to participate in these jobs.
This is not working, right? Thank you. Thank you very much to Mariate, as your friends know you, Mariate Arnal from Google. And what about you, Ana Paula from IBM?
So, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I think that we have to take into consideration that there are there are challenges in all levels. But one area that is critical for us is really when we think about leadership. Because when we talk about diversity and inclusion, we're really talking about significant cultural changes. And culture only changes at the top. And we decided to do a survey. We talked to about 2,300 companies around the world to really do an analysis on where do we stand in terms of bringing women into the leadership positions. And the findings were really worrisome. 79% of the companies, they don't have a clear priority for or business priority for bringing women into leadership roles. 67% say that they do it when they can. They think it's fine, they think it's the right thing to do, but they don't have a formal priority. And what are the underlying issues? What are the real reasons behind this lack of putting this into priority? Number one, most of the companies are still not sold on the business value of having a more diverse population and having a more participation of gender equality in their organizations. So even though we have so many reports, so many research showing that companies that have more women, they have better profitability, their revenues grow faster, so on and so forth, they're still not totally sold on the promise of the business case. The second is, like I said, I mean, it's still looked at something that HR has to do, diversity deputy has to do, not a position that has to come from the board or the senior leaders in the organization. So very much like laissez-faire approach. We do it when it's convenient, right? And the third one is that there is still a lot of bias, right? So when we asked men and women if they had a different gender, do they think what's the likelihood of them being promoted? 60% of the women said that they were male, they would have much higher probability of being promoted, while only 15% of the men acknowledged that. So there is still a lot of bias in the organizations that there isn't really a clarity of how difficult it is still to make progress and the challenges that you have to face as you advance. And as we talk more here in our conversation, I'm going to talk a little bit of the actions and policies and things that we can do to change that, even based on the companies that are doing better than the others in that arena. But I just wanted to share some of the findings that we did and how important bringing women to leadership roles it is in order for us to change the current status.
Thank you, Ana Paula, for sharing with us your experience in IBM Latin America. Monica Flores from ManpowerGroup, President for Latin America as well.
Well, you asked what's next. First, I'm going to answer what shouldn't be next. Next year, we shouldn't be here discussing the same data, discussing the same activities, because Mariate and Claudia and Paula have been in a number of panels during the last 10 years discussing the same issues. We've made some progress, for sure, and it's a journey. It's a journey, but we haven't moved the needle. What's next? I propose, and thank you, Chiara, for the invitation. Probably I'm so provocative, but I'm saying what I really think. Next year, we should be more men and women in this forum, not so few. Probably each one of us should bring one man or one kid, girl or boy, to listen and to see the challenges that we are facing. Of course, there are some realities. I'm not the expert in rural communities or poverty. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this group, corporate females and CEOs and people taking decisions in a big city. But still in our city, let me share some data. 6 out of 10 women stop working when they give birth the first child. And in the second is 8 out of 10. 16% of companies discriminate for age and gender in their first step of the recruitment process. Don't even in an interview, in the first step. 48% of companies don't have diversity policies, and only 2 of 10 have a diversity area. 48% of Mexicans, women, rejected a job just because the impact on their personal lives. So this is where we are standing now. I think that we should be more aggressive in the actions that we are taking, not only inside our companies, but the pressure that we are making in the public sector, in the media, in the policies that our authorities are taking. They can help us with quotas. They've done their job. The private initiative, we have not done our job yet. We should do more activism, but in the right way, not shouting in the middle of the street, not that kind of spectacular. Doing more activism at the interior of all the commercial chambers or organizations to push them to move the needle. If you see the photographs in Mexico of the executive commissions of the biggest business organizations, all of them are men. All of them. Just in American Chamber in my last period, and now in the SED with Claudia. Just one woman. We should have more proactivism in the labor that we do in schools to change the culture for the next generation. Probably we won't see the change. Probably we won't see the 50-50. But our kids should see real parity. We should be more focused in what we are doing with kids, men and women, the example that we did, the language that we speak, and promote more male role models and ask them to help us to do the change.
Thank you very much. This is your time, Claudia Herreramoro from P&G.
Thank you, Yuri. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Women's Forum, for having us. It's great to be able to share some of our experiences and not just talk of what the journey has been, as it's been said, but really what's next. And at Procter Gamble, P&G, what we are saying, it's really, okay, we all know it's a competitive advantage. We all know it's an economic advantage to be able to have men and women in leadership positions. For P&G, it's really beyond that. It's a responsibility and an obligation that we feel that we have to be able to change some of the stereotypes and some of the biases, etc. So we are focusing now in 3 areas, I would say. First, it's on advertising. Being the largest advertiser in the world, we believe that we can change some of the stereotypes. And there are some commercials and copies where we are changing the women role in the commercials. You probably just saw our latest Gillette campaign in Latin America and mostly in the US and in Canada, where we were trying to change what masculinity means and really stop talking about toxic masculinity, but really the role of men in the life, and with that, the role of women, and many other campaigns. So we believe that we can influence the way women are perceived with our advertising. The second one is doing more activities, just like with Google, they were talking about STEM. We are also talking into different projects for communities in need where we can influence also at a very young age both boys and girls into the way they think of the opportunities that each of them can have. So going to those communities and already trying to have programs influencing, it's also another responsibility. And the third one is with our own employees. For many, many years, we have been pioneers in supporting the women to be able to grow, doing some policies and some guidelines so that, because we have different needs. So, and then we are now evolving into involving men because it's also very, very important to have this inclusion. So it's not just for women, but rather it's both for men and women. That's something that we need to make sure that we involve them, that they have a role also in the personal part so that they don't feel it's only the woman's responsibility. And I hate when they say, and I help you. No, you don't help me. You are responsible for raising this kid just as much as I am. So it's not asking for help. Thank you. So it's not asking for help. It's a dual responsibility as much as it is in the workplace. So we need to have the same rules of engagement, acknowledging that we as women, we have different needs in terms of the maternity, but then they can also have the paternity leave. And I will talk more on that when we come back.
Okay, let's try to focus, in fact, in what's next, and in order to know how can we benefit and all the people that it's here with us in the Women's Forum 2019. Can you share with us what has been working in your companies and in your personal experiences in this women's agenda?
Let me jump in so I can continue with what I was saying. So when I first had my first kid was 21 years ago, and we didn't have maternity leave at the time. So we only have what was the law, and that was it. So I went to my manager and I asked for it, and I think it's something that we are all entitled to do, to ask for what we need. Sometimes we say, no, that's never been done. It's not possible. I think it's important to go and ask for what you need. So at the time, I asked for an extended period of a maternity leave so I can be with my kid. I was living in Switzerland at the time, and the company accepted it. They say, okay, fine, let's give you a couple of months so that you can adjust and see what you do. It started as a pilot, and then with a couple of other friends that also asked for it, we were able to start a pilot worldwide on maternity leaves, and now it's a policy to the point that now we are also having paternity leaves. So it has evolved into not just for the women, but as I was saying, for the dads, because it's also shown that if the dad, the parent, is more involved from the beginning, he can have a better relationship with his kids. So it's also their option to have now that paternity leave. And I think if the companies acknowledge those needs and they can have more, not just the maternity and paternity leave, but also flexible time and all the things that have been talked about, I think it will really give us the opportunity to be able to build careers, to be able to be in the corporate world while also being able to have the balance. And my advice to everyone is, if in your companies you do not have this type of arrangements or policies, you ask for it. Go and ask for it and see that it can be done.
Thank you very much, Claudia. So in this, and it was Monica who mentioned it, the sponsorship versus mentorship, which has been working best at your companies and in your own experiences?
Well, if I talk from my own experience, I do think that sponsorship has a much bigger impact than mentorship for advancing women. I cannot think of my career progressing without the support of many, and most of them, actually the great majority of them, male leaders. Really giving me opportunities, allowing me to take risks. So I moved my career throughout Latin America, but I went to New York, I lived in China. So I had really a lot of opportunities to, challenge myself and progress, and that would not happen without the support of a man. So to me, this is really a critical piece. Mentorship, I think, is also very helpful to give you some guidance on what types of skills you should be looking at, what types of development you should be considering. Of course, it's a much, let's say, frequent type of relationship that you can establish. So if you have any questions, any doubts in your roadmap to grow, you have the opportunity to have that kind of discussion in a more open forum. But I think it's really the combination of both, and clearly the sponsorship of leaders is critical. And given the fact that still the majority of the leaders are men, I really encourage each man that is here and that has, the power to support the progression of a woman that really does so, because I think it's really the way that we're going to change the status quo.
Monica.
Well, I think that we should promote programs, but in a very scientific and professional way. Talk about sponsorship is easy, but it's very difficult to find the right sponsor with the right goals. Sometimes the companies lack of that knowledge. It's easier to be a mentor than to be a sponsor, and to be a sponsor costs political cost, I may say. So we need to promote career conversation. Women are not very proactive in talking about what's next for them in the company. We tend to be quiet, to wait for a promotion, but we don't ask our bosses what's next for us. And that allows us not only to have clarity of what's next, but also to upskill or reskills ourselves to get promoted. That's one of the reasons why many women are not promoted. Yes, there's discrimination, there's a lot of issues, but we are not skilling ourselves for the next era, for the digital era, in technology, in math, in languages, whatever. We need to have this roadmap, what we need to do for ourselves, besides the sponsor and the human resources program. The other thing that I think it's crucial is to have the CEO support and real commitment into diversity, not only in gender, but also in religion, sexual preferences, and age. And he needs to lead by example. And there should be metrics that should be linked to the variable compensation of the leaders. Because sometimes the company has this goal, the CEO is very committed, but the leaders, the middle management, are stopping all the programs because they don't believe. But when you link his salary to the progress they do in these terms, the needle starts to move. And finally, I think that we should be aware that 50% of the employers in Mexico and 45% of the employers globally say that they don't find the right candidate at the right time. They don't have a pool of talent for the new skills that are needed in the market. The skills in the 21st century are more female skills in general: communication, team building, collaboration, problem solving. Naturally, we have those skills. So if we can have this business plan, if I may so, to create the pipeline for the future, for sure companies will look for females to build that strategy.
Yuriria, if I might add, I think that all these programs are great, but you have to look at this as an ecosystem, right? You have to prepare all the stakeholders within the ecosystem to make sure that these programs are successful. And I think that's where we hit a wall sometimes, because we create these great career development programs for women, we super empower women, but then we don't prepare the organization to embrace these women coming on board with ambition and, ability to negotiate their salaries and raise their hands, etc. And I think that's, that really should be the focus on what's next. And it's, I think a lot of companies, less than we wish, right? And Ana Paula gave great numbers on this. But more and more companies are realizing that, yes, they need to bring women into the organizations, but they don't realize that if they don't work on the inclusion side, then women are just going to leave. And this is the same with not only women, but all other minorities as well. So I think that inclusion should be the word that we should look at next. It should be from all perspectives. It goes to biases, unconscious biases. It goes to privilege, okay? And how people in the workforce currently have a lot of privilege and they see themselves as, this might be a threat to my privilege. So those are hard conversations that we need to put on the table.
And what have worked at Google, for instance, because it's very studied that women are silent, and one of the topics of this meeting in Women's Forum is like breaking the silence. And what do you think that works when going to women and to say, you can do it better, you can do it more, you can want it more, you can raise your hand, you can ask for a raise in your salary. What is working at Google, for instance, to do that kind of?
So I think, again, raising the conscious of the organization, and we've done that through many programs, one being unconscious bias, for example, which is just having people in a room and make them understand, again, how the dynamics that are cultural dynamics, right? Mrs. Lagarde, again, she was talking about Japan and the challenge that they have. They have to change a culture. You cannot change a culture until you understand the underlying dynamics of the culture. And we need to understand that, from the temperature in the rooms of an office are being set, there's a study about this actually, are being set at the men's standard, and women are always cold. And so from that stupid, thing to unpleasant remarks that, men make just because we're going on an offsite and we're going to go do men activities. And I'm not saying we do women activities. I'm just saying let's do an activity that's open for everyone. And I think that raising the level of awareness and consciousness to everyone in the ecosystem, not only women, will enable organizations to be more successful with all these programs.
Where do you find the resistance to change in your companies? Still, there are big resistance.
I think, as I've been mentioning, and they're saying the inclusion. I mean, if you are only now you don't want to segregate the women's group and only doing things for them, because then, I mean, at the end, we're talking about diversity. And so, and right now, it's not just men and women, it's all the new, the LGBT community, the trans, I mean, you don't have to talk about just men and women, but everyone with their own self being able to come to work. And that's why inclusion, I think, it's really the next word that we should be talking about. Respecting everyone's ideas, respecting everyone's backgrounds, and just come to the table. And that way, it's going to be more innovative, more breakthrough thinking than if you are only the same, I mean, within the same group. So it's really about diversity and inclusion. So gender, it's one item, but I think it goes beyond. And what we're trying to do, at least at P&G, it's really to talk about D&I as the key next step for the future generations.
Let me comment on that, because I think this topic about the cultural changes is absolutely critical. And many people, they really don't even know where to start, right? They don't know, they're not conscious that the things they are saying or the behaviors they are carrying are in some way incenting the prejudice, the prejudice and the behaviors that really lead to some sort of exclusion of some groups. So we at IBM, we are carrying a very broad training that is actually mandatory for everybody in the company on what are the types of behaviors that you should be really conscious about. or are the types of comments that you should be taking care not to make, and a zero tolerance policy on, any type of harassment and any type of comment that might look derogatory. And it's very interesting because sometimes you make a few comments that when you talk, they don't look so bad. But when you get the reports of some of the claims that the employees make and you read those reports is when you see how shocking it is, some of the comments that we end up hearing, and people think they are not in any way destructive or they're going to harm or hurt people, but at the end of the day, they cause a significant impact to the whole environment where people are working. So to me, this item on bringing awareness, training the people, making sure they have clarity on the impact of how they behave and what they say is going to have on other people is very eye-opening, and it can start to change the dynamics of the workplace.
I think we should see this issue in two dimensions. One is from the individuals. We need to be clear that probably mainly in Mexico, we are trying to see the differences and not the talent. We are one of the countries that discriminate for physical appearance in the world. So we need, that's where we are starting. So to change the mindset is very difficult. Given the example, having metrics, all this training, all these things are very useful. But what at the end leaders should understand, mainly these very macho leaders, is that it's a matter of business and competitiveness, and that we need to build our brand and we need to be attractive for the best talent in the world. If we don't do that, young people are not going to apply for our vacancies. Those very talented that we need to be innovating in our company. It's a matter of productivity, competitiveness, and to survive for all these startups, to face this global competition that is scary. And we're still talking about letting young people to join the team or women. We are like, I don't know, 100 years behind where we should be. And if we want to make this economy grow and to be protagonists and to maintain our ranking in the economy globally, we should change how we are managing businesses.
Mrs. Lagarde was talking before, she was talking about the quotas, and she said she was a strong believer of quotas. We have seen that quotas work in the politics arena, but we haven't seen quotas, or we don't know too much how it's working in the private sector. How do you think it do work in the private sector, in companies, or is better to find other ways to promote women?
Well, probably the global companies like to talk about objectives or goals. We skip the word quotas because it's very aggressive, probably. And I think that when I was, as she said, and as Mrs. Lagarde said, when I was younger and a dreamer, I was against quotas. Now, I really think that are necessary for a period of time. But we need to be very clear, women, where and when and why. And we need to help all the teams to build that pipeline in order to achieve the goal. If not, it won't work.
I think that it's about the process as well. It's not about only the quota, but it's about the process and how do you ensure fairness in the process. So it's, if you set an objective, and it goes back to the granularity that she was mentioning here, Mrs. Lagarde, how do you make sure that you set those objectives at the very granular level? And at Google, at least, we are obsessed with objectives. We created these OKR, objectives and key results, that we, everybody knows other people OKRs. You can see who has, which OKR, and you can call and make them accountable. And I think, as a company, one of our OKRs, as for the CEO, but as well for every leader in the organization, is diversity, and within diversity, women. And then that trickles down into how the processes are created and are measured against. So, if you are hiring in the hiring department, or if you're a hiring manager, part of the process has to be how many women do you have coming to the process, right? Do you have women in your process or not? And then it just continues. So we're measuring, when we do our calibration meetings, we're measuring, so how many women did we promote? And then if we didn't promote any women, then what happened, right? Let's have that conversation. Because it's not promoting women because of promoting women, because we need to make the objective is, let's have the conversation about why we didn't promote more women. And then that, that creates a level where these conversations, again, are put on the table and where the process is affected beyond the quota itself.
I think that some of the rejectors of quotas is because as a woman, you don't want to be in that position because you're a woman. I mean, that for sure. You want to be there because you're talented, because you have the skills, because you can deliver. So with that in mind, as a starter, I agree that in some instances, you do need the quotas, but as Mariate was saying, it's with the beginning, with the base. I mean, at the end, we're 50-50 in the world. And now in the universities, the good news is that graduates are really being 50-50, more in some careers than in others. But you do have the base, you do have the talent. So starting from the recruiting processes, you should have the quota of having 50-50 because that's what universities are bringing us and what the society is composed of. So that's why we should start with the 50-50. And then as we grow within the companies, I think that's where sponsorships are so important. I think that's where policies are critical, understanding the different needs of both men and women. And that way you can promote the growth within the company. But the base, it's really something very, very important to start with.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that when you talk about business, it's much easier if you put as goals. And if you do that from each layer, each step of the way, right? From the people that you are recruiting, making sure that you're looking at resumes from both genders, from a more diverse group. And then as you go through the promotion process, you are asking the right questions. I was actually doing this week with my team. I said, why so many guys? And where are the women, right? And we can't find. I said, no. Let's take a look, and I'm sure that there are many women out there that we can consider. So I think it's really about being very critical all the time, asking the questions and making sure that this really cascades down the organization, because it doesn't matter if just I do the questions or if just my direct reports do. If it doesn't become a systematic approach in all levels of the organization, is not going to change.
Hello, Chiara.
Chiara wants to join.
Chiara.
Yuriria, we are disruptive in a women's forum. I just wanted to, I know that Ana Maria doesn't want us to be late, but I really wanted to say that this panel has been incredible, extremely interesting, because you're not just talking but doing. And I wanted also to see that with our partner Google, we launched now a very interesting campaign, and I would like that maybe you could prove this year to convince the parent how important it is for the young people. And I would like to say that with P&G, you didn't say it, but we are working a lot to change mindset. At the Gillette campaign, I was with Mark Pitchers last week in Paris. It's incredible what you do, and they can change things because they touch 5 billion persons. And what I really like in this panel, that all of you, you're not talking about acting, that thank you so much to be in the Women's Forum community and bring such strong ideas, best practice, and I'm sure that leaders with you, this country will change. I'm really convinced of that. Then sorry for jumping in, but I really wanted to share my thanks for what you said and what you're doing.